The Lord be with you. A reading from the Holy Gospel according to John. Thomas, called the twin, who was one of the 12, was not with them when Jesus came. So the other disciples told him, "We have seen the Lord." But Thomas said to them, "Unless I see the mark of the nails in his hands, and put my finger in the mark of the nails, and my hand in his side, I will not believe." A week later, the disciples were again gathered in the house, and Thomas was with them. Although the doors were shut, Jesus came and stood among them and said, "Peace be with you." Then Jesus said to Thomas, "Put your finger here. See my hands. Reach out your hand. Put it in my side. Do not doubt, but believe." Thomas answered him, "My Lord and my God." Jesus said to Thomas, "Have you believed because you have seen me? Blessed are those who have not seen and yet have come to believe." The Gospel of the Lord. John chapter 20, verse 24 is a very popular verse when we talk about St. Thomas. Because all that people remember about Thomas is that he doubted the resurrection. He doubted that Jesus rose from the dead. So it is very common to hear people say, "Doubting Thomas. You are just like a doubting Thomas." And people have said, why do we have to celebrate somebody who doubted Jesus, who doubted the resurrection? Why are we celebrating him as a saint? Because he showed unbelief. He didn't trust the report from other disciples that Jesus is risen. Wanted what is called empirical evidence. Wanted put his hands in those nails, put his hands in his side to be sure. Well, the answer is simple. In 2016, Pope Benedict XVI was preaching on the feast day of St. Thomas. And Pope Benedict XVI said, "Thomas taught us something." He taught us how to look at the cross of Jesus. You see, that's the biggest lesson that we learn. Every time we look at the cross, Jesus points us to the cross. Jesus on the cross. If Thomas had not doubted, when Jesus appeared a week later, probably Jesus would not have said, "Come, Thomas, put your hands here. Put your fingers in my side. Touch the wounds. And so Benedict XVI says it was a movement from the face of Jesus to the wounds of Jesus. And that is what we see whenever we look to the cross. We see how we were saved. We see the points where the blood flowed from. We see the points where the blood of Jesus flowed. And so Jesus invited Thomas not just to prove to him, but he wanted to point to the wounds. And so the wounds of Jesus became very significant. And then the second reason why St. Thomas is celebrated is because of his response after he touched the wounds of Jesus. For the first time in the New Testament, in the Gospels, Thomas called Jesus God. He said, "My Lord and my God." He used Jehovah, Yahweh. Now, those two names are the names of God from the beginning. Yahweh. It's a confirmation of John chapter 1, verse 1, when it says, "In the beginning, the Word was God, and the Word became flesh." If you read from the beginning of John chapter 1, especially verse 14, when it says, "That Word became flesh and dwells among us." God, the God of Genesis chapter 1, who created heaven and earth, by his word everything was made, came down to dwell among us. Now that was the faith of Thomas. Thomas moved from unbelief to come to understand that Jesus is Jehovah, is him Lord, and Jesus is Yahweh, is God. So he says, "My Lord and my God." So he gives us the reason why we can worship Jesus. He gives us the reason why we can bow before Jesus, why we kneel before Jesus, because he is Lord, he is God. And so the faith that Thomas embraced is the faith that we too today have embraced. When Thomas recognized Jesus as God, he used the name of the Old Testament God. In all of the Old Testament, God was called Yahweh. And he called Jesus Yahweh. And like I said, it confirms all that Jesus himself was saying about himself. When he says, "Even before Abraham was, I am." And I am is the name of God, which is Yahweh. He called him I am Yahweh. And that is the God that we worship. So today, as we celebrate this feast day of St. Thomas, let us ask for his intercession, especially in those moments when we too doubt. There are doubts that arise in our hearts and in our minds about Jesus. Let us ask St. Thomas, help us get clarity, like he got clarity when he touched the wounds of Jesus.